And joining me now is the journalist who has the scoop on this, the Australian's Washington correspondent, Joe Kelly. Joe, look, can you tell us about how the US is looking to get its allies, including Australia, to play a bigger part, particularly in the Indo-Pacific?
Hi, Sharri. Good to be back on the program. So, look, I think in simple terms, the US wants allies like Australia to step up, to do more, to share more of the defence burden. And this is because they think that will contribute to a more effective deterrent against Beijing. And I think that's important because I think implicit in that is really an admission that America can't deter Beijing on its own, at least not anymore. And so this really does put a lot of pressure on its allies in the Indo-Pacific, particularly Australia and particularly Japan, to step up. So we have seen now this new elevation of 3.5% of GDP being spent on defence as the new gold standard. So the Trump administration is not shy about requesting that, but I think it goes deeper than that too, Sharri. And I think really what the administration is trying to achieve is a deeper integration of allies like Australia and Japan in an operational framework, a joint operational framework. So it's not just about shared strategic objectives and priorities, it's about an understanding of how they can be achieved in practice. And that's so important when we're talking about Taiwan, because America really believes that in the next couple of years there could be a contingency in Taiwan. And I mean, if that happens, there really needs to be an understanding about what Australia might do. So I've been informed by Pentagon sources, this isn't really about asking for a pre-commitment from Australia towards supporting the US in Taiwan. It's about getting an expectation of how can we respond to various contingencies that may happen.
Yeah. And, you know, under governments past, do you think Australia would be there standing side by side with our ally, the United States? But you just aren't that confident under the Albanese government, that's for sure. I mean, they've become so close to China. I mean, Albanese was just there meeting with President Xi, and he still hasn't even had a face-to-face meeting with Trump. It's just extraordinary. But Joe, can you tell us about the concern that Australia might not be spending enough on AUKUS, on the first stage, what's known as Pillar 1 of AUKUS?
So look, this is a huge concern, at least of the Department of Defence, about Australian defence spending. So this concern's been relayed to me in a number of ways, most recently the concern that we can't even afford to pay for Pillar 1. So that relates to the acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines, at least 3 Virginia-class submarines by the early 2030s. So there's a lot of interest in this, Sharri. But to me, that comment suggests that one of the things we might expect out of the AUKUS review is a request for Australia to pay more. So to me, that was a bit of a marker about that review.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a problem because we do seem to be relying on AUKUS almost, you know, primarily, almost entirely for our future defence, and the government's not investing in other infrastructure or weapons. Joe, President Trump and Putin are set to meet in Alaska on Friday. Trump has told the media today that he's going to know very quickly, he said, within 2 minutes, whether he can reach a deal with Putin. Now, there's been the suggestion that Trump doesn't want to get into the weeds with the territorial deals, that he wants to leave that up to Zelensky and Putin. But isn't this precisely what needs to be done for a ceasefire to be agreed on? You know, the weeds over who gets what territory and whether there is a concession from Ukraine to Russia?
Look, Sharri, I think you're right. At the end of the day, there will need to be some sort of understanding about what's happening with territory. This is going to be one of the key, perhaps the key question when we're talking about some sort of permanent settlement and peace in Eastern Europe. So I think you're right to identify that. I think the concern that Europe and Ukraine has is Donald Trump getting excited about his meeting with Putin and then seeking to impose an arrangement on Ukraine. So I think that's why the meeting that Trump had with European leaders was significant. But at the end of the day, I think Ukraine will have to be dealt into the equation, and that issue which you've identified is going to have to be solved. I don't think it's going to be solved in this meeting with Putin, though.
Yeah, it's amazing how there's just not as much focus on the loss of life in the Russia-Ukraine war as there is in the Middle East. Doesn't that strike you as unusual, given this has been running for a bit longer and more than 1 million people have been killed?
Well, I certainly think that that Washington hasn't lost focus on that particular issue, Sharri. It's one of the things that Donald Trump says nearly every time this topic comes up. So that's certainly at the front of his mind. He's trying to ensure that that has a broad reach and people understand that when they think about what's going on in Eastern Europe. And certainly the numbers are very depressing. It's the bloodiest conflict since World War II in Europe. So certainly that is at the top of Donald Trump's mind. And remember, he is trying to present himself as the ultimate peacemaker and unifier.
Indeed. All right, Joe Kelly, thanks so much for your time.